Just checking I haven't got any feedback. Yeah. Welcome to the March meeting of Planning Applications Committee. I'll run straight into the agenda. I think I can deal with this because I've been informed of all of them. The apologies for absence are we've been hit by COVID in some ways. Councillor Dean cannot make it and is being replaced by Councillor Latif. Councillor Quilliam can't make it and is being replaced by Councillor Butler. Simon McGrath, Councillor McGrath can't make it and is not being replaced by another member of his group. So we're down to just 9 members this evening.
Chair, I also have to report lateness.
Oh, yes, of course. Councillor Henry is on her way. Apparently there are some public transport issues. She is on her way and we very much hope she'll get here in time for the first item. Item number 2 on the agenda, declarations of pecuniary interests. Do we have any? No? Okay, good, thank you. Item number 3 is minutes of the previous meeting. Can they be agreed? Agreed, thank you. So item 4 is we move on to the applications in front of us tonight, of which there are 6. Now, I'll explain things as we go along to members of the public in the room and at home who may not have attended a planning applications committee before. We don't take the items in the order they're listed. We try our best to take those with more speakers first and down to those at the end, which have fewer speakers. We have at least 1 speaker on every item tonight. So the order in which we will take the items is first item number 7, and then 9, then 5, then 6, then 10, and then 8. So those are the 6 items. I guess if they take roughly half an hour each, I don't know, the meeting may go on for about 3 hours. So probably after 2 or 3 items, I will have a short interlude for us to go and get water, go to the toilet, whatever we need to do. So there will be a short break, some point in the middle. Okay, so for the benefit of objectors, applicants, supporters, council members, any speakers, the way it will work is as follows, and I'll use the example of item number 7, which is the first one we will take. The meeting opens with the discussion on each item opens with a presentation by the planning officer with responsibility for the item, who will give us a presentation on it. We then hear from any objectors who get 3 minutes each to a maximum of 2 objectors. We then hear back from agents or supporters who get an equivalent amount of time. So here. So if, for instance, there is 1 objector, they get 3 minutes, the agent then gets 3 minutes. If there are 2 objectors, 3 minutes each, the agent will get 6 minutes. After that, the planning officer may come back to clarify or pick up on any points made in the contributions from members outside the committee. Then we move on to questions from members of the committee. From that point on in each application, it's just members of the committee that can speak, unless specifically allowed by the chair. Then we can questions, which is questions of clarification on the factual elements of the reports. Then we come on to an actual open debate on the merits or not of the applications in front of us and the officer's recommendations. And finally, we then go to a vote to either approve, reject, or defer to a future meeting. Those are the 3 choices in front of us on each application. Okay, so we'll go straight into item number 7 on the agenda, which is the Rufus Industrial Estate, which is one that we looked at in the last meeting and deferred to this meeting. So I can invite Tim Bryson to give us his report on his report.
Thank you, Chair. Members, the application was originally presented to the committee on the 10th of February this year, where members voted to defer the application for the reasons set out on page 90 within the agenda. So just for clarification, it was to do with further detail on the type of contamination identified on the site, some further clarity on the financial costs of the contamination and the viability of the scheme, and also with the affordable housing block, which is block D within the application, whether they could be actually amalgamated with the market housing within the other buildings. For ease of reference, members, I've put in there where the additional paragraphs have gone into the report. So, for example, contamination paragraphs 12.2 and 12.3 are the additions. So hopefully you've followed that within the report. Notwithstanding that, Chair, I will go through the application slides that we have before you on the application. So the site is located south of Dawlish Avenue, accessed off Hazelmere Avenue, within the northern part of the borough. You have residential to the northwest, train line to the east, and the recreation ground to the southwest. To the immediate north, over here is currently a development which is very nearly completed, which is formerly known as Hazelmere Industrial Estate, is now known as Earlsfield Place. The site comprises commercial buildings with a mixture of B1 and B8 uses. So the proposal itself is for a full redevelopment of the site to provide 96 residential flats and also 880 square meters of commercial floor space at ground floor level. Running through some of the floor plans at ground floor level would be largely the commercial aspects and also the servicing, bike storage facilities for the development. A turning head is created at the end of the new road. The new road would feed off the existing new road that just been constructed at Earlsfield Place. A undercroft is proposed, which would allow for future access, should that ever come about, for pedestrians and cyclists, with the potential to access through to the recreation ground to the southwest. Members should note that the proposal doesn't include any alterations to the recreation ground. Some site pictures, so existing buildings on site, largely 3-story, of simple brick appearance. This is a shot further down looking south on the newly constructed Earlsfield Place with townhouses on the right hand side and 6-story flats on the left. A view from Durnsford Road Recreation Ground. The site, you can just see some of the buildings through here. The building in the background is a building under construction within Wandsworth. And again here from the recreation ground. This is a view from the access way that leads up to Wellington Works at the back of the site. So the site is on the left and the site boundary is where this fencing is here. Again, looking from the access way at the back through the site. The closest neighbouring residential properties to the site is at 40A, 40B Dawlish Avenue here on the left-hand side. The site is on the right-hand side here. Just some developments in the local area that have been constructed. In terms of the flats and the layout, all flats will be dual aspect. So for example, these flats here, views through the front and back. The linear approach of the development ensures that they are all dual aspect and they have been designed so that the majority have their own independent access onto the external walkways. It is a stepped approach to the building. This is the roof plan. There's a variety of outdoor spaces here and also up here. This is a view of the proposal from the railway track side. So the existing Earlsfield Place construction is here, and this is the proposal here. So it does step up as it goes southeast into the corner of the site. In terms of materials, it would be a variety of facing brick with aluminium frame windows. So viewed from sort of within the site, you can see the stepped down appearance as this goes northwest within the site. The elevation, essentially that would face Durnsford Road Recreation Ground. So as I said, the design has put the tallest elements of the building in the southeast corner and then stepped down towards northwest as it goes towards neighbouring residential properties. Again, the site on the site before you here, looking from the other side, so from the Dawlish Avenue side. Block D, which is the affordable housing block, is here. So that is a 3-storey building, largely tallying up with the 3-storey townhouses on the adjacent development just completed. So it is much closer, obviously, towards neighbouring properties, which is why it is 3-storey. Some 3D visuals proposed with the application from the applicant, just to guide members in terms of how to envisage the complete design, and also from the recreation ground itself. From within the site, the affordable housing block here. And then from there's an access way at the rear which serves the Dawlish Avenue houses, and this is how they envisage the view from back there. And so, members, we do have the full set of floor plans here. So as it goes up in height, you can see that it steps away, full to 8 stories at the top. Just a snapshot of some of the flats. As I said, use of external walkways have independent access for people's own front doors. Each flat has an private outdoor terrace. Just some section drawings, really to show you that the railway line is actually higher up than the ground level of the site. So, members, overall, officers consider the additional information put forward has hopefully satisfied members with the reasons for deferral. You'll note that we have put in an Appendix 1 at the back of the report behind the plans, which is a letter specifically from the affordable housing provider who is looking to take on the Block D. Just members there. I'll draw your attention now to the modifications sheet, where we've received further objections from the councillors for the area, with officers' response, and also putting in there as well the additional information which the applicant sent and which was sent round to members yesterday. So overall, Chair, officers remain happy with the scheme, recommend permission be granted. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim. Okay, as I explained, the next part is to hear from, on this occasion, 2 objectors. I'll take them in the order I have them on my list. So the first one will be Chris Beach. Is Chris in the building? Okay. You should be able to switch your microphone on with the button in front of you. Brilliant, thank you. You have 3 minutes. This will light orange when you've got a minute to go.
I'm actually taking 6 minutes, so the other person hasn't come along. I request the application is refused for the following reasons: incomplete disclosure, failure to maximise development in Merton, social segregation, mass and height, and urban greening. Disclosure: the independent assessor's report on the financial viability assessment, or the FVA, has only been made available to the public in the last 36 hours. This is an important document as contains key information related to the estimated costs, which are extremely high and being used by the developer to justify features which the community strongly object to, such as height, bulk, and no road link to Wellington Works. The assessor's report that has now been provided is in draft form and missing critical sections required for appropriate due diligence and transparency, such as Appendix 1, the Potter Raper cost review, and Appendix 2, the viability appraisal. In addition, from what I can see, the assessor's report does not cover the significant abnormal costs estimated by the developer. The developer's cost estimate must be independently verified, and the application should not be approved without sharing the complete and final assessor's report plus any additional assessment of the abnormal costs with the public. In the absence of the independent assessor's report, I requested a quantity surveyor with 20 years experience of estimating costs for commercial and residential developments to review the financial viability assessment provided by the developer. This was submitted as a representation. His view was that many of the costs appear inflated. Many of the abnormal costs in the FVA have been extrapolated from the adjacent Hazelmere estate without any on-site investigation at Rufus. Rufus is a different site to Hazelmere. It was constructed in 2000 and will have undergone asbestos and radiological remediation at that time. It was illegal to use asbestos at the time of construction of Rufus, and therefore risk of contamination is very low, yet a cost of £200,000 has been estimated by the developer. It is not appropriate to just extrapolate from Hazelmere to Rufus. The developer states that elevated radiological levels have been detected on the boundary with Hazelmere. However, there have been no measurements or testing on the Rufus site. The developer has also not confirmed what radiological remediation occurred at Hazelmere, yet they estimate a cost of £800,000 for Rufus. Given the size of this cost and the level of uncertainty, I suggest the developer undertakes measurement or survey work on site for minimal cost to improve the confidence in the estimates and reduce the risk premium that is evidently being applied. The quantities and direct costs associated with the contamination remediation on the adjacent Hazelmere site should also be shared with the public. Number two, maximising development. In order to maximise residential development in the area, both Rufus and the adjacent site of Wellington Works must be developed to full potential. The only way to develop Wellington Works to full potential is to provide vehicle access through Rufus. If not, Wellington will not be developed at scale due to unsafe access provisions. The developer has stated in their design access statement that a new road through Rufus is possible, but it would require an increase in costs. This could be accommodated with savings from remediation and construction estimates. A petition for the road link has been signed by over 350 people. The benefits of a road link would be maximum residential development for Merton Council and highway safety preserved for local residents, including children of Wimbledon Park Primary, by taking operational and construction traffic away from these high-risk areas. In addition, the cost of the vehicle access through Rufus can be significantly reduced. The developer has analysed a road link and concluded it is not feasible. However, the analysis is flawed. The road does not need to be 8.5 metres wide. It does not need to run through the middle of the site. It does not need to be 20 miles an hour. Making the road narrower and designing it for lower speed will make it work, and none of these options were studied. The developer states that if alternative access route to Wellington via Dawlish is widened by 5.6 metres, to 5.6 metres, it will work for cars, pedestrians and cyclists. But if it works for Dawlish, why not Rufus? Please note that widening access from Dawlish does not work for Dawlish, as it would require knocking down our homes. The proposal should be rejected and redesigned for vehicle access through Rufus. Segregation. The pack agenda notes state that all affordable housing is still planned to be in Core D. This is social segregation and unacceptable. Social housing should be integrated and distributed throughout the development. Scale and mass. Scale, mass and height of the proposal is excessive and not in keeping with the surrounding areas. Merton's urban design officer has stated that the form and massing do not relate well to the adjacent development to the north, and the overall feel is of overdevelopment. Finally, urban greening. I also object on the basis of inadequate urban greening, which Merton Council has stated is essential for a development of this scale, and yet the proposal falls below the GLA minimum threshold. Note that the urban greening at the Earlsfield Place development by the same developer has actually involved installation of plastic grass in a pocket park, which is damaging to the environment. Height should be reduced and greening increased on elevated sections to improve local amenity. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I'm going to take advice from officers. We've had two people asking to speak in favour. Is just one going to speak? Oh, the agent and the supporter, that's Ben Young and Stephen Sinclair, will share their time. They have the 6 minutes that Chris just had. Are they in the room or on Zoom? I'm not seeing anyone in the room, so I'm assuming they're on Zoom. So if it is Ben Young first, if you could start, and then when you're finished, it's just Ben Young. Okay, well then we'll start the timer again. You will have 6 minutes. You should maybe be able to see it on the screen, but this light will turn amber. And if you're on Zoom, maybe an officer will just remind you when you've got a minute to go. So do we have Ben? Oh yes, I can see on the Zoom.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Chair.
And we can hear you. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. So yes, we sought to provide further clarity for you and your officers on the matters that were raised at the last committee. In respect of contamination identified on the site, we know that it is comprised part of an incandescent mantle works and a chemical works. Your committee report at paragraph 7.5.22 onwards identifies elevated levels of radiation specifically in the northeast of the Rufus site. And we know that radioactive thorium is present. Our team undertook the remediation works on the adjacent Hazelmere site, and therefore we have all the knowledge and understanding to remediate the Rufus site to required standards. In respect of the cost of the remediation, your officers have now clearly directed you to the cost analysis submitted with our application, which has been independently assessed and agreed by your professional advisors at circa £1.8 million. The cost of identical work at the adjacent Hazelmere site are known to be £3.996 million. We're in no doubt that remediation of this contamination is necessary and that the costs of doing this are high, and that unfortunately there is no way of these being able to be passed on to previous owners, with any potential developer of this site having to take responsibility for contamination. The high costs of remediation are reflected in the level of affordable housing offered, and as a result, the 8 homes proposed are the maximum that can be delivered. There will be early and late stage review mechanisms to establish at the appropriate stages throughout the development whether the site can deliver any additional affordable homes. And we trust that these mechanisms reassure members that our affordable housing offer is open and transparent, and that we are committed to fully reviewing this as the development progresses. In a change to proposals since our last appearance, we can also now confirm that all of the affordable housing will now be delivered at London affordable rent with no shared ownership, at a cost to the developer of just under £490,000. Members also previously discussed pepper potting, and in response, we have spoken to the registered provider who will likely take the homes, who have written a letter which can be seen in your report pack. This confirms that to keep service charges and running costs to a minimum, a registered provider needs to keep tight control, and this is only possible with homes located in the same building. This is a position common to all providers. The letter also confirms that the zero carbon nature of the new homes will further help to reduce service charges, that the affordable housing building is closest to the blue badge parking spaces, and that the ground floor amenity space will be open to residents of both affordable and private buildings, promoting integration. We are proud to have designed the development to be tenure blind, and you will not be able to distinguish between private and affordable homes, with all of the buildings being designed to a high quality standard. Members also discussed previously about whether emergency vehicles could access all of the buildings within the development, and I can confirm that they absolutely can, and that there are no objections from statutory bodies that have been raised. The site is proposed for allocation in the draft new local plan for 90 to 106 new homes. We feel, as do your officers, that this is a high quality development that will provide energy efficient new homes and workspace on a brownfield site in a highly sustainable location, currently occupied by short-term tenants, that has very significant cleanup costs due to the radioactive contamination that goes back decades. These cleanup costs underpin the amount of affordable housing proposed, which will be assessed through a late stage review to establish any further affordable homes can be delivered. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, that's the objectors and agent have spoken. So now we return to Tim to see if there's anything that was raised in those 2 contributions that he would like to specifically come back on.
Thank you, Chair. Lots of issues raised. I think in terms of the viability aspects, we have our independent assessor who has looked at this in detail. As part of that process, they have gone out as well to a company to review the costs, specifically the cost aspects of the proposal put forward within the applicant's viability. And that company is known as, I think in my report, Stuart's report is Porter. I can't recall the last bit of that name. But we have looked at it and it has been assessed. In terms of the affordable housing being in Block D, you will see that we we went back to the applicants and they've come back with a letter from the intended affordable housing provider to take on the block, who have outlined it is attractive to have it within one detached block. It should be noted they are the same affordable housing provider who have delivered on the adjacent site. So in terms of that aspect, really my advice this evening would be to remain it as is within Block D. In terms of access through to adjacent Wellington Works site, whilst there could be some merits in such a proposal, but we have to assess the application on its merits. There's no policy reason for putting through a vehicle access through to the adjacent site. The proposal does deliver on housing, and the applicants have put forward that in creating a vehicle access would result in the loss of units and also flood risk issues as well. But what is proposed is future-proofing pedestrian and cyclist access. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We now move to the contributions from members of the committee. First questions and then a debate, and then we'll move to a vote. I obviously cannot enforce asking councillors to keep to this, but I think it would be useful if we stuck to the reasons we deferred last time and the changes, because we gave this a good airing last time on all of those issues. And I think it would be useful if we tried to stick to those areas on which this report is different of the reasons we asked for deferral. So I'm seeing first councillors Christie, Draper, Southgate, Butler, in that order for questions.
Thank you, Chair. And you'll remember I obviously wasn't here at the last meeting due to COVID myself, so I didn't participate in that discussion. But you know, having read the follow-up information, I understand that this issue of having the affordable units in one block separate to the rest of the development was part of the reason for deferral. Now, I've read the letter that's come as an appendix to this report from the likely affordable housing provider, and it says it's imperative that service charges and other costs are kept to an absolute minimum to make the homes truly affordable. This is only possible if we can keep a tight control of the maintenance and operation of the building, which requires that all affordable homes are contained within the same building. And I don't know if I just don't understand that. I don't understand the logic of that. What is it that the residents in the block of affordable housing will not be getting? So just can the officer just explain that to me, because I don't understand the logic of it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm hoping the officer's taking notes, because we're going to take all 4 questions and then come back to answer them all. So Councillor Draper, Nick.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is actually on the contamination, and I'm a simple man. There are 3 figures shown in the report which are remarkably specific: £2,631,792, £2,427,437, and what looks like it might be from the adjoining site, a possible £1,812,332. They are very specific numbers. And then you go on to the business of the actual contamination itself, shown in paragraph 12.2, and all of it is that this site investigation identified relatively little contamination, but there's some evidence that at least a portion might be, and there's no measurement within building footprints or from soil samples has been undertaken to date. Limited evidence of on site of asbestos to date. In other words, nobody's actually sure what contamination there is and how you can, my question is, how can you get from really knowing absolutely nothing to be specific down to the last pound note? That's my question.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to add an adjunct to that question, which officers may be able to ask. If, as hinted at by Nick there and suggested by the objector, if the cost outrun in the end comes out as significantly lower than it's saying in this, do we then claw back more the SIL money or enforce more affordable housing on the block if that that cost does be shown to be significantly lower? But that's an add-on to next question. Councillor Southgate, Peter, you have a question.
Yes, thank you, Chair. We've received figures in the last couple of days about actual costs, which I know are dated the 16th of March. And can we take it that these figures were not known when we met a month ago? And they seem very large numbers. So, you know, in terms of their impact on the viability of the whole project, that's perhaps a question for the developers. But I just want confirmation that these are new and you know, we have to think about their significance.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Butler, Ben.
Thank you, Chair. I think that order has stolen my thunder somewhat because they're all similar questions to mine, especially on your suggestion there, Chair, about the clawback. What options do we have there? The logic behind the one block over there. I'll just add just a question from me. In the plans here, it looks like the social housing block is designed slightly differently. Can you just explain to me the extent of that different design? If it is just superficial on the outside, then that's fine, but does it extend to the inside? And does that actually affect the logic that we also want to question on Councillor Christie's point?
Okay, thank you. We'll take one more. Councillor Henry Joan, you have a question.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, on page 138 and the last paragraph, I don't really understand it. So if you could just explain some more, because it appears to be the test hasn't been done. You know, there are more tests to be done, and I'm quite concerned about the contamination, you know, degree, and you know, especially we're going through COVID, so we just want to know that, you know, whatever we're doing, you know, we're doing the right thing, not to damage people's health any further.
Okay, thank you. I've seen Councillor Alan Breaches wants to ask a question as well, but I'm going to go to the officers first. And just a quick sum up, we have I think 2 issues in all of those questions, 2.5. There's the separate block and various issues around that as design and the feasibility or not of doing the pepper pot, spreading social housing across, or affordable housing across the whole development. Then there's obviously the cost implications, mine, Nick's, and part of Ben's question, and Joan's question relates to that in terms of the pollution and other problems that could be on the site. So those 3 things, I think. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. With regard to service charges within the affordable housing block, we are obviously not housing officers, but it would be to do with the services within the building itself. So, for example, if you had the affordable units pepper potted around with the market homes in those blocks, the service charges could be different because it takes into account the market housing and the lifts and the hallways. So we have to take it on face value what the affordable housing provider is saying in terms of service charges. In terms of the 3 figures in the committee report on contamination,
well, I'm not sure we need to read over the exact figures again. I mean, Nick read them out, but the question was, how do we know that they're reliable? Councillor Southgate asked if they were recent, and I asked if they turn out to be lower, do we get more back in terms of either affordable housing or SIL money and clawback?
So In terms of the figures within the committee report itself, Chair, those are the ones that have always been with the application put forward. But in terms of what was submitted yesterday by the applicant to go to members was as part of the late stage review for the adjacent site, which is the Hazelmere Industrial Estate site. They've submitted the late stage review. As part of that, they have to submit their costs. So that's what they've done to assist members, just in demonstrating what the costs were on the adjacent site. So that's what to clarify, that's what those figures were that were sent round members yesterday. They weren't figures to do with this current application in terms of this current site. I mean, in terms of the costings, obviously it's been subject to investigative work, but what the applicants are telling us, they can't do intrusive investigative work because of the type of radiation that was found on the adjacent site, and it is shown to be just within the application site. In terms of the design of Block D, yes, it is different. The applicants have put forward to try and achieve as close as they can to zero carbon with that block. So, for example, that block does have triple glazing, and it will be run off its own independent energy supply, separate from the other blocks. And in terms of the further tests, Councillor Henry, to be drawn, that is quite a standard approach for when considering planning. So there will always be further remediation investigative work. And Chair, coming back to your point about the clawback, so yes, as part of the late stage review, should the cost not be as high as expected, then there would be clawback for affordable housing at that stage. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lambrita, you had a question. Stephen.
Thank you. My question is about the 96 flats in all being dual aspect. Can officers just remind us what are the benefits of dual aspect as opposed to single aspect?
Benefits of dual aspect is really cross ventilation through the flats, and also increase in light and outlook, obviously with the path of the sun, going around the buildings. So I think generally the outlook and light and ventilation are the main benefits.
Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing any further questions, so we go to a debate and comments on the report and the application. Who do I see wants to speak? Councillor Crowe. Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. At the February meeting, before we decided to defer, I spoke against this application. I didn't like it. I regret to say I still don't like it. Nothing I've heard so far this evening has persuaded me otherwise. I think it's an unneighbourly development, unneighbourly for the surrounding houses and streets for access point of view. I think its massing is too great. It will affect the skyline and the views from Donald Wreck. I don't like the fact that it's 55 of the 96 are one-bedroom flats when our policy about mix of housing is 1/3, 1/3. The affordable housing, 8 units, is, well, just unacceptable. We've been around the houses on that on several occasions. I don't like the idea that the affordable housing in its own separate block. I understand that the Housing Association may prefer that, but I'm not sure that's particularly relevant. I find it odd that they would have their own power supply. Everything about this application strikes me as slightly wrong and at variance with our policies. So I'm not inclined to support its approval. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Crowe. I'll take that as a proposal to refuse and see if there is a seconder, and there is. Okay, so we have a proposal on the table. Councillor Draper wants to speak. Nick.
Yeah, I'm going to give a proposal to defer, Chair, I'm afraid, because I'm really conflicted over this one. I mean, we've got in front of us a chance to build 100 flats, and the flats, to me, look like they're pretty good flats. We've passed an awful lot worse before, But what that is, it's an opportunity as well. And according to the London plan, according to the wishes of the council, to build 40 affordable flats, which would be of real advantage to Merton, a real advantage to the people of Merton. But we have still in front of us a proposal for just 8 affordable flats. And I still genuinely do not understand why. And the reason I don't understand why is because we don't know anything about the viability appraisal other than these rather strange figures, and they genuinely are strange, getting down to the last pound for something which you're not even sure of. That's the only viability figure we have. Now, Greenwich, Southwark, Bristol, Brighton, Croydon, they all have public, open viability approvals. And when I was cabinet member for housing, I tried to push us to get that as well, and I clearly failed. And I have never felt more uncertain as a result of not being able to see that viability approval than I do at the moment. Now, I would love to see this come back with the full viability appraisal, sorry, so that I can really understand why these developers really can only afford 8 flats on something of this size. I'm not certain of these figures. I can't see where they came from. I want to understand it better. And so I'm suggesting we defer again.
Councillor Alan Brutus, Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. I do like the number of flats proposed. I do like the dual aspect. I do like the design, but I feel that there is still something more to come from the developer. I want them to be more magnanimous, more forthcoming. I don't think we should reject. I agree with my colleague that we should defer and give them one more chance to come back to us with more information on viability, serious information from PA Housing about those comments they've made about a real benefit to affordable housing being in one place. We all, as councillors, do not like to see these segregated, separated areas, but if the housing provider there already can make a better, bigger case for us, addressing Councillor Christie's points, I do think it would be wrong for us to reject. I think a lot of work has gone into it. I think the objector has raised some issues that I'd like to see comments on paper from the developer. I think we should defer again.
Thank you. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Chair. Agreeing with the points already made, just to add that the evidence that is saying the cost of the clear up of the contamination is not good enough for me. It's not at all good enough for the small amount of proposed affordable homes. I want them to give us more information, and actually I'm voting with the deferral, but my comments to the developer would be to take this seriously, the suggestion of a clawback, conceding that they might get the cost of this contamination remediation wrong, and the right thing to do would be to put that directly into more affordable homes. So I want a more direct comment from them coming up. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think that I almost entirely agree with Councillor Crowe on, and everyone else who's mentioned this kind of social segregation and the paucity of the evidence, as Councillor Butler, Councillor Christie pointed out, on why it's different, why it would be cheaper, other than and the number of affordable housing. And I think I'm not here to defend the developers, but the developers might argue that we don't really know how much the cleanup cost is going to be until we start digging into the ground, and that can't happen until we've got planning permission. So we're in a kind of a bit of a Gordian knot there. But I think we're agreed as a committee, as I've heard what people are saying, that we're not going to pass this tonight. Our decision is whether we reject and send them back to the drawing board and we probably put another 6 months on the process, or we defer again for 1 or possibly 2 more meetings to basically say we were deferring for the same reasons as last time. And maybe we rushed it to bring it to this meeting because just 5 weeks later, we've come back and the information from what I'm hearing is not good enough. So our decision, I think, is reject or deferral. I had the proposal for rejection from Councillor Crowe first, so I'm going to take the vote on that. If that is passed, we reject. If that isn't passed, I'll take a second vote on whether we should defer. So hands up. There are, other than me, there are 8 members because the Liberal Democrat is missing this evening. So yes. An extra comment, sorry, from Tim.
Sorry, thank you. Members, just to clarify, the applicant's viability report has always been on the website since the application was submitted. So the details have always been up there for review. And Chair, you sort of summarised it in a nutshell there in terms of they have to put forward estimated cost within a viability report. They look at what are the estimated costs for everything, including sales of the flats and marketing and how long that takes. So that is true. They don't know the exact cost until they start digging into the ground. But what they have done to try and help demonstrate this to you is obviously submit the costings yesterday of the neighbouring site, which is the same developer, and what that shows in terms of the costings for site remediation. So really, Chair, just clarifying those points. I don't know, Chair, if you want me to comment on the deferral on those grounds, but I would advise against it because there's not much more the developer can submit to us.
Okay, thank you for that. That's helpful. I think, councillors, I'm sorry, I can't take any more comments from outside the committee. I'll go with councillors Butler and then Draper. Sorry, that's Butler. That's Christie and then Butler. Billy.
Chair, we should all wear name badges. So, notwithstanding the points made about the viability assessments, on just back again on this issue of the segregation of the affordable, not social, affordable units that are proposed to be included. I still, Tim, in Tim's answer to my question, he more or less said the provider has said it would be more expensive and we take their word for that. And yet in the report, it says officers concur with the reasoning given by the housing associate or housing provider as to why they should be in a separate building. I don't understand it. I don't understand what the reasoning is other than the housing provider are saying that it would be easier or preferable.
Thank you.
So that is my outstanding issue. So if the developer were going to come back with more information, that is what I would want to see. I don't know whether that is plausible or not, or if they can come back with more information on that, but I believe there is still outstanding information that would help us.
Thank you. I think on that there is, I think, quite a strong suspicion amongst members that the late stage assessment may come back to show it hasn't been that expensive and they would need to provide either more SIL money or more social housing. The view, I think, of this committee would be that that should be actually more housing rather than just giving us some money to build elsewhere. Were that the case and the assessment went up by 2, 3, 4 properties, they would have to put some in some of the other blocks or change their designs and come back to us to build a bigger separate block, which I don't think we'd be very pleased with. So again, that's a contradiction within our discussions, really. But anyway, 2 more I've asked to speak. Butler, Councillor Butler, Ben, and then Councillor Draper.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with your last point there. If we are, because I want to just, before we go for deferral, the reason I'm saying deferral is they haven't given us a detailed plan of a clawback, which I think we should be suggesting from this panel. I agree that if it turns out they do need to build more housing, then it would have to be in their current designs on more plots, which is fine with me. To go back to Councillor Draper's first point, I am conflicted on this because there are so many homes overall in the application. I want housing to be built. That's what makes these decisions really difficult. But at the moment, the evidence that they're bringing, the developers bringing, to why it would be so expensive to build more than a paltry, affordable homes in this development is not good enough. And if they do think it's good enough, then back it up with a plan that they'd be happy to claw back if their plan goes wrong. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And I hope finally, and then we can move to the vote. Councillor Draper.
Yeah,
And briefly, I hope.
Mine was actually a very, very small point, and it was that I haven't looked at the developer's website. Mayor Maxima Culper, but what I was actually voting on or not voting on was the report in front of me, and the report in front of me doesn't give the answers. And frankly, I want to trust our officers' reports rather than something that's come directly from the developer, because the developer will have put her own costs on that, and I don't blame them for it. That's the way that capitalism works. But what I actually want is what it is, as close as possible, what it is actually going to cost, what that viability assessment, appraisal, whatever, really was. Thanks.
Thank you. I had suggested earlier we would go for a vote first on deferral and then first on rejection and then for deferral. But having heard the debate, I think it might save us a vote because from people's contributions, I maybe expect this first vote to pass, which is a deferral to a future meeting. If that vote fails, we can then have a vote on altogether rejection. But it seems from contributions so far that looks like it may be the will of the committee, but we shall see in an actual vote. So I need hands up in favour of deferring to a future meeting. That's all 8. For the reasons explained, which will be reflected in the minutes. It's 8 to 1 not voting myself. So that's in effect unanimously deferred to a future meeting. Thank you. Right, the next item on the agenda, as I explained the order we were going to do it, is item number 9, which is Bennett's Courtyard in the marvellous ward of Collieswood. And again, for people at home or in the building, we have 2 objectors to speak, who will get 3 minutes each, and then an agent for up to the 6 minutes, which is the total of those 3 minutes. But first, we hear from Stuart Adams, the officer, to present his report. Stuart, where you go.
Thank you, Chair. The item before members is the application for Bennett's Courtyard, which is on Watermill Way in Collieswood. As you will see from the report, the application is back before members of the Planning Committee. I'll just quickly touch on what the application is for. So the application is for extensions to the existing buildings here on Bennett's Court with a rooftop extension to create 15 new flats. So in terms of, I'll just quickly move through the site plan just to give it a bit of context. So the Bennett's Courtyard is here, 3 blocks. To the south is Runnymede. To the north of the site is Mercenary Mills, and then to the east, sorry, the west is Vista House. The application site is located in the Wandle Valley Conservation Area, and the existing buildings on the site, Bennett's Courts, are locally listed. As you will see from the committee report, the reason why the application is back before members of the committee, you may recall that committee made a decision on the 19th of June last year. This is following the approval of the application and a High Court of Justice judicial review, whereby the decision was that the original decision needs to be quashed. The reason for that was the omission of the conservation areas comments in the committee report. So just to clarify, that the case officers was aware of the conservation areas comments when making the recommendation for committee. However, the error was that those comments were not formed part of the committee report, so members could see those comments. So in effect, that decision has been quashed and it's back before members to be reconsidered. So I'll just go through some of the points in terms of the committee report. There are the reasons why it's back to committees is outlined in the introduction section of the report. In that section, the councillors, conservation officers' comments are in full for members' consideration. In addition, there are some additional information in the mod sheet for members' attention in terms of the location of listed buildings, etc., in the locality. So I will identify those listed buildings and give you a bit of context to the application. I'm just going to move through the slides now. So this is the ground floor plan, proposed plan. There are no changes as per se. The only changes at ground floor level are the introduction of some bike stores and cycle storage to accommodate the 15 new flats. As we move up towards the top of the building, the cores will be increased in height to accommodate the new flats. So this is the floor plans of the proposed new flats. There are, as I said, there are 15 new flats proposed. There's a good majority of dual aspects units here. There's only 4 single aspect units. This is just a roof plan showing the development. To the north is Merton Abbey Mills, which is the historical core of the conservation area. So just moving through some of the elevations, the south elevation here is the rear elevation. So the proposal is for the extensions above the existing building, which is along here. The northern elevation, which faces Merton Abbey Mills, is the elevation here. We've got the extension to the existing building to create the 15 flats. The elevation here is a northeast elevation. You've got Merton Abbey Mills here on the right hand side. Again, just showing the proposed extension. So this elevation here is a cross section showing the development. There's a first floor communal garden area which all the flats will have access to. On the right hand side is the historic core of Merton Abbey Mills. Again here, from the west elevation shows the proposed extensions, and here on the left hand side is Merton Abbey Mills and the William Morris Public House. This is just a close-up of the western elevation showing the proposed extensions. So just moving to the proposed massing. So the dark grey on the screen here is the proposed additional floors. Merton Abbey Mills is here. This one shows it from Runnymede, the additional floors. You can see in the context the larger buildings here, which are actually outside the conservation area, and the lower sort of historical core buildings are 1 or 2 stories in Merton Abbey Mills. So in terms of the actual treatment of the proposed extension, there will be a continuation of the louvres and also the window details to match the existing buildings. The key change in terms of the top floor will be the light grey zinc panelling, which is here. So this is quite a useful illustration for member consideration, showing existing arrangement and the proposed extensions here. Again, another illustration taken from inside Merton Abbey Mills, the existing situation and that proposed. So this is just a view showing the context of the site in terms of Merton Abbey Mills. As I said before, this area here is within the conservation area. These buildings along here, the larger buildings, are actually outside the conservation area. So in terms of listed buildings and relationship of the proposed extension to listed buildings, as I said before, Bennett's Courtyard is actually listed itself, locally listed. In terms of statutory listed buildings, the 2 pink dots here indicate the statutory listed buildings. All these other buildings in Merton Abbey Mills are locally listed. Again, so this is just an extract from the character appraisal of the area. The application site is here. It shows Merton Priory's scheduled monuments and also the listed buildings on the site. So just moving towards some site photographs, the application site is here. And on the right-hand side is Merton Abbey Mills. All these buildings here are in the conservation area, and these buildings here on the left-hand side actually fall outside the conservation area. Again, another photograph showing the application site and Merton Abbey Mills here on the right-hand side. A similar photograph. And these are just photographs from within Merton Abbey Mills itself, showing the proposed building, and some various photographs showing the rear of the building. So just to wrap that up, that's a CGI showing obviously the proposed building. The key consideration for members is the scheme needs to be reconsidered following the question of the original decision. The key test really for members to consider is whether the proposal preserves the character or appearance of the conservation and listed buildings. That would be the minimum requirement for consideration in terms of policy. So that will be the key consideration for members compared to the other scheme. You do still need to consider all aspects of the scheme, but those were the reasons why the decision was quashed, because of the conservation areas comments were not included in the report, but they are now included for the report for members' consideration. So the application is recommended for approval subject to conditions in section 106 as before. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stuart. And before we go on to the two objectors and then the agent, I think I want to make it absolutely clear that the omission of the conservation officer's comments at the last meeting when we decided this, which was the reason that went to court and was quashed, and we have to take it to reconsider this entire application. It was an administrative error by officers within the planning department. And as chair of the planning department, I take responsibility for that. It was a mistake and an error. Any suggestion that it was done in some way deliberately to try and force the committee's hand or force through this application is absolutely erroneous. And I won't have it repeated in this committee, although it has been suggested elsewhere, and I don't want to hear it. It's not true. Having said that, we'll move on to the objectors. Philip Kratt, who I believe we heard from last time, are you in the room?
I am in the room.
You are. And Sally Lyons, you're in the room as well. So we'll time you at 3 minutes each. So, and if assuming Philip is going first, go ahead. And this will turn amber when you have a minute to go.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members. It is the stuff of movies to be able to revisit a decision that you've taken and to think again about it. Just to remind the members of the committee, it's the same committee, the same members. Last time it was a close vote, 5-4, but that doesn't matter because, as Churchill said, a majority of one suffices. However, there are things which the committee need to look at. And I, for my part, wouldn't suggest it was anything other than administrative error. I would comment, though, that the Conservation Officer's comments are still not uploaded to the public part of the planning portal website of the council. It's important to consider these things. It's important to put them in context. Your Conservation Officer advised that she did not feel that the proposed additional floor is an enhancement to the existing building, and went on to comment that Bennett's Courtyard is a well-designed development which complements its historical industrial location. The contrasting materials do not embellish these buildings, but detract from them. So she isn't unsupportive, she's actually critical. She's saying it detracts. And that's important because I want to cascade down through the 3 levels of policy. The NPPF, which members of the committee will be familiar with, it says in relation to heritage assets, when considering the impact of a proposed development on the significance of a designated heritage asset, in this case, that's the conservation area, great weight should be given. So it's not an even contest, great weight has to be attached to it. And it goes on to say that any harm should require clear and convincing justification. And I'm just going to pull members up there and remind them that this is a scheme of 15 quite small flats with no on-site affordable housing, enough of a contribution towards affordable housing to buy about a quarter of one unit, and a third of the units being single aspect. In that context, your own policies in your core strategy require, in the Wandle Valley, development to conserve and enhance. That's policy CS5. Policy CS14, design, requires development to conserve and enhance heritage assets. And policy in the London Borough Merton Sites and Policies Plan, DMD2, likewise requires enhancement, as does DMD4. And as indeed do the specific policies in the Wandle Valley Conservation Area. Your officers in their report to this committee suggest that preserving is sufficient. I'm suggesting it's not, that there is a policy requirement for enhancement. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Philip. And secondly, for the second lot of 3 minutes is Sally, who's also in the room. Go ahead, Sally. And again, this will turn amber when you've got a minute to go.
Up and over 250-page High Court judicial review that ruled the last vote unlawful and decision quashed. In case there's any downplaying of its significance, freedom of information request shows there's been no other successful JRs quashing this council's planning decisions in the last 5 years, and it may be much longer. The council's lawyers claimed in their initial response all grounds were without merit, wholly unarguable, would be resisted in court and legal costs recouped. Instead, ground 1 was conceded and the unlawful decision quashed. Grounds 2 and 3 were therefore academic and not tested in court. The council's own lawyers stressed you can't get a decision quashed on a legal technicality, and indeed you cannot. They did not recoup their costs and had to pay hours. That's £10,750 of taxpayers' money. Last time you, the voting committee, did not have the conservation officers' views to work with. The officers' report is still disingenuous, I feel. I do not agree the CO's words are verbatim. They were encased in an email of the 8th of June, revealing they were offered over 6 months into the live application, and they only came to light thanks to legal disclosure. You may wonder how an application recommended for approval, which is so entirely bound up in conservation and heritage issues, could be presented to the committee, omitting the views of the conservation officer. Fortunately, this time you have her views, which are the same as the Wandle Valley forums. It would again be disingenuous to downplay the legal weight of her views. You, the voters, must make up your own minds of their significance. The Listed Buildings and Conservation Area Act states special regard must be given to the desirability of preserving a building, its setting, or any features of special architectural interest. Not equal regard, special regard. They are exempt from PDR airspace rules, and it's not right airspace developments be ushered in by stealth. Heritage special considerations take precedence over other considerations. The heritage legal framework protects conservation areas. If a bespoke, sympathetically designed, architectural award-winning, locally listed building set amid some of the borough's oldest listed buildings in the Wandle Valley Conservation Area, adjacent to the river and green corridor and site of nature conservation importance within the Merton Priory Archaeological Priority Zone and exempt from PDR rooftop rights, is not protected by heritage planning law, then heritage planning law is surely dead and conservation areas are set for destruction. The Conservation Officer found the development does not preserve or enhance, but detracts and mars. Your own policies require developments to enhance. There will be harm which will be permanent and irreversible. This time you have the Conservation Officer's views to fit within the special regard that law requires. The unlawful quash vote was 5-4 in favour. Heritage law requires rejection and that you vote against approval. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Sally. The agent, John Murch, are you in the building or on Zoom? I'm presuming on Zoom.
It's not John Murch. My name is Paul Tucker. I'm a barrister instructed by Mr. Murch.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Go ahead. You have up to a maximum of 6 minutes. And as you're on Zoom, somebody, I think an officer will remind you when you have a minute to go if you need to use that time. Go ahead, we can hear you.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think I'm going to use all of those 6 minutes. Thank you for the opportunity. It's extraordinarily unusual for a barrister to address a planning committee, let alone a QC. And I've been asked to do that given the unusual circumstances of this particular application. So my name is Paul Tucker. I'm head of chambers at King's Chambers, asked specifically to address the committee and to assure the committee that the report has been through the scrutiny of lawyers on behalf of the applicant behind the scenes. And that's particularly in the light of the High Court challenge. The application is obviously before you again for the reasons set out in the report, and to ensure that the views of the Conservation Officer have been properly brought to your attention. They have. They've been quoted in full, and it's important that you understand exactly what they say. What the Conservation Officer does in two very short paragraphs, in the first is to address the conservation area, and in the second to address the effect on the building itself upon which the extensions will go. There is criticism. It said that there'll be a detraction from the simple industrial lines of the Bennett Courtyard buildings. But in terms of the conservation area, what the officer says is that there wouldn't be an enhancement. Why is that important? It's important because of paragraph 1.5 of the report, which quotes the statutory test in relation to conservation areas, which is section 72, which requires you to pay special attention to the desirability of preserving or enhancing, and that's the statutory test which you have to have regard to. In relation to this, officers have concluded that there is a neutral effect in relation to the heritage assets, and in those circumstances that there would be the meeting of the statutory test. If they concluded that there was harm, you would indeed have to give great weight to that. That's paragraph 199 of MPPF, which also refers to preserving or enhancing the significance of conservation areas. So in terms of the test, officers have set out the right test, officers have set out the full views of the Conservation Officer, and officers have also formed their own view on the basis of that information as to whether there would be harm to the heritage assets, and have concluded that there wouldn't, and have therefore given you a clear recommendation. The report properly addresses the reasons why the decision was quashed on the last occasion by agreement, and importantly, it was only ground one on which it was quashed, which was the failure to report the Conservation Officer's recommendations, and that's also addressed in the report. So we are here in unusual circumstances, but nonetheless, the substantive merits of the case remain, and the substantive merits of the case are very similar to those which previously led this particular committee to resolve to grant approval in those circumstances. So it's the balancing exercises which is important, and we say that's been done. This is a site which is within a growth area that's expected to develop a significant quantum of new homes over the coming years. That includes by making more efficient use of land, which is exactly what this proposal does. So in those circumstances, the correct approach is to revisit the resolution that was made last time, reconsider it in the light of the information from the Conservation Officer, but read that very carefully indeed, because it doesn't say quite what the objectives have just said. And in those circumstances, we say that the council's growth objectives can be delivered whilst protecting the heritage of the borough and those parts which are sensitive to change. In those circumstances, the scheme remains the same as it was before, including the enhanced level of affordable housing which has been offered by the applicant, and my clients would respectfully invite members to uphold the officer's recommendation and approve the application. Thank you very much indeed. This may be one of those rare occasions where a barrister comes in under time.
Thank you very much for that. Before I go back to the officer for comments, I've got a few things just on the way the committee will deal with this. The previous application we had before us, we had discussed once in committee and then deferred and discussed again. And so my advice that time was try not to go over what we'd discussed the first meeting, because we'd given it a full discussion. The planning law side of this one is the first decision and the entire discussion has been quashed. So you are free to have the full discussion again. Although I think we are likely to concentrate on the Conservation Officer's comments. And I don't want to get into a hierarchy of members of the legal profession, but I think it's going to hinge on this. The solicitor in the room suggested that it must preserve and enhance the conservation area. The barrister on Zoom suggests that it must preserve or enhance. And there's that difference between the use of the word and or, which I'm hoping would be my first question to the planning officer on this. But first, if there's anything specific in the contributions you heard that you want to come back on, and then we'll move to questions, and that will be my first question.
Just one point really. The officer's view on that point is it needs to be preserve or enhance. So it doesn't have to enhance. That answers probably everybody's question on that point.
Okay, can I open it to the floor for questions on the content of the report? I see councillors Alan Bretus, Southgate and Latif in that order, then Draper. So councillor Alan Bretus, Stephen first.
Question to officers. As per paragraph 1.7 on page 214, can they confirm that the comments of the council's conservation area officer were known to officers when they came up with the recommendation to approve, that they had known about the conservation officer's comments, but still went on to recommend that we approve, and that, as the chair has said, it was a mere administrative error in not including the conservation officer's report. We are guided by the officers here in the main, aren't we? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll take all four and then come back to you if that's all right, Stuart. So I think Councillor Southgate, you wanted to ask a question. Peter.
Thank you, Chair. In reference to the same paragraph, in fact, as Councillor Lambritas has just referenced, comments of the conservation officer were removed from the report so as not to send mixed messages to members. In hindsight, this was an error. Was it an administrative error? It sounds to me more like a decision to omit those comments, which was an extraordinary decision, actually, because I think we're used to having the conservation officer's comments, which may well be at variance to the planning officers. So we should have been left to make that judgment, I think. But I don't know if, Chair, you want to comment on just administrative error? Or
I will come in on that one specifically. Yes, it was administrative error. Yes, that statement was made by an officer and should have been overruled by a more senior officer knowing planning law, who should have said, you can't do that, and we must put it in. So in that way, I'm saying it's an administrative error in that the error by the officer wasn't picked up by somebody senior or myself. Maybe I should have seen it in the report and said, where is it? So myself and the senior members of the planning department were taking responsibility for this, and it's an error that should have been picked up. I'll take the final two questions and then go back. So Councillor Latif.
Thank you, Chair. I think my questions have been asked by Councillor Alan Bretus and Councillor Southgate, but on page 212 of the report, under the officer's response to the conservation officer, it says that officers do not disagree with that observation. However, as required by planning policy, there is no requirement to enhance the character and appearance of the conservation area. So is that correct? Or
that goes back to the discussion we just had about whether it needs to, and the officers have said it is the word or. So an application can be acceptable if it either preserves or enhances, so that if it only preserves and does not enhance, it is at least preserving, and we could pass this. I'm not saying we should on those grounds, but it's only if it is detrimental or is a denigration to the conservation area that we would have to give a lot of weight to that in terms of whether to approve or not. A neutral, it preserves, without saying that it does enhance, is acceptable under our policies and under planning law. Councillor Draper, Nick, you have a question.
Yeah, I don't think I was here for the original decision, so I feel entitled to ask this. First one is a bit blooming predictable, given what I was talking about the last item. There should be one affordable flat amongst these. There is no rationale, no, as to why that can't be done. All it says is that you're going to give, they're going to give 70,000 quid towards something or other. I'd like to see the figures. That's number one. Number two, and this is really, I don't understand. In what way does this preserve what's already there, the area that's already there? And if it doesn't preserve it, in what way does it enhance it? Because I have to confess that I feel it does neither.
Okay, I'm going to deal with the second part. We have obviously had a number of discussions about this. It's not a question of whether it preserves the building, it's whether it preserves or enhances or is denigration, or it detracts from the conservation area. So, and it's a judgment call for officers and will be for us when we come to votes of whether we think this extra floor on top of this building, we can say, does it detract from the conservation area as a whole, not from the building specifically? Does it preserve it? Pretty much we're saying, oh, it's just about the same as it is now. It's not detrimental or enhancing, or does it enhance? Officers aren't arguing that it enhances the area. The advice is that they would say that it preserves the area. So I'm hoping those discussions on the conservation area and that have been dealt by me from the chair, so that I can hand back to Stuart on the one other issue that Councillor Draper raised, which is the amount of affordable housing in there.
Yes, in terms of the affordable housing, as part of the application, the applicant would have been required to submit a viability report with the application. That report would then be independently assessed by the council's viability assessor. And during those discussions between the two parties, the officers would take the advice of our independent assessor whether or not the level of affordable housing is the maximum that can be delivered. And that was the outcome of those discussions. So the viability was subject to independent review from the council's independent assessor.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I have one more question so far. Councillor Christie, Billy.
Thank you, Chair. Can the officers comment on the amount or the proportion of proposed flats that would be single aspect properties? You know, we had reference in the previous item to the benefits of dual aspect versus single aspect properties, but could you just, if you can, let me know how the proposals for this additional floor compares to the proportion of single aspect properties in the existing building?
Okay, thank you.
Fortunately, I don't have those details of the number of dual aspects in the existing building, but there are quite a high number of dual aspect units in the proposed development. In terms of, I think from memory, there's 4 single aspect units and all the rest would be dual aspects. And obviously, as we said before, the main positive aspects of dual aspect is ventilation in the flat itself, and also different outlook from different parts of the building.
Thank you. I'm just looking through the plans to see whether, obviously we have plans for the proposed additional floor. Do our floor plans included in our pack include the floor plans for the existing floors? I mean, we won't be able to get a number, but at the moment it's 4 out of the proposed new 12 would be single aspect. We won't be able to go through every floor plan, but we might be able to look and get an idea. It looks as if well, I'm not sure whether I'm looking at the right part of the plans, but it looks like there are quite a few single aspect flats. The ones on the corner will have a window side and front, but the ones in the middle look like they're single aspect. So it looks like the rest of the development has about a third. I can't be sure of that, and I'm not sure we'll be able to come up with a definitive, certainly not a definitive number or even much guidance on that. That would be my best guess, yes. I'm not seeing any other hands up for questions, so we'll go on to the debate and comments on the report and the recommendation in front of us. And I'm seeing, I'll go in this order as I saw the hands go up: Alambritis, Crow, Southgate, Draper. Okay, in that order. So Councillor Alambritis, Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. I do believe that colleagues should vote for this application now that we have been through the issues with regard to the error that has now been corrected, and we should be reminded of the recommendation by officers who were privy to the conservation areas comments, but still felt, given their expertise, qualifications, subscriptions, that it was in order to grant permission subject to the conditions of Section 106 legal agreement. I do believe that we've had a good discussion. We've respected the judicial review. We've had comments from solicitors, barristers. I think the clearest possible route forward is to agree to this application as per our officer's recommendation. That's clear and forward thinking in terms of adding additional housing units within this borough. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. And that's in line with the officer's recommendation, and I'll take that as a proposal to approve the officer's recommendation. But we'll carry on with comments. Councillor Crowe, Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. Earlier we saw a map of the area and it identified a number of locally listed buildings and some statutory listed buildings within the conservation area. It's my judgment that this additional floor on Bennett's Court detracts from the conservation area. People within the conservation area looking at Bennett's Court, if it had this additional floor on, I think the whole impression created would be one of detraction. So I think we must refuse this application.
Okay, thank you for that. Before I move to the next two, I've been advised that the planning officer with responsibility for this, Mr. Tim Lipscomb, has something he wants to clarify. He's joining us on Zoom. So there he is. Go ahead, Tim.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to step in to provide some clarification on the previous decision. Now, this was a decision made under a different management structure at the council. You'll note that new team leader and new head of DC have since been appointed. I just want to make it clear that this wasn't an officer mistake in isolation. This was an intended route. The first draft of my report indeed included the conservation officer's comments. On review of that by the management team, there was an indication that the conservation area officer's comments should be amalgamated into the overall officer recommendation rather than reported independently. And that's the reason that they weren't included. I happen to agree that they should be included, and I think the judicial review has clearly indicated that they should be included, and we will be looking to include them in full going forwards. But I just wanted to set out the process and what led us to the point of not including the conservation officer's comments in that report. And I've nothing further to add. The only thing I was going to come back on, since I've happened to be fairly familiar with the scheme and the site, the reason the layout includes single aspect units is because it follows on from the layouts of floors below. The construction of the building involves a central glazed atrium, which means that securing dual aspect is more difficult because it has to follow on from the layouts below. Hopefully that will assist members in their decision making. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Tim. Okay, carry on with the councillors' comments. Councillor Southgate, Peter.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm grateful to Mr. Lipscomb for his clarification there. My view very much in line with Councillor Crowe. So the award-winning Bennett's Courtyard is a 4-storey block of flats at present. And just from what was put up on the screen earlier, if you add a story to it, and this is the conservation officer's point too, is that you do detract from that unity. It does just not look as good with that floor added. So you can't argue that it doesn't preserve the unity. It detracts from it, and it does affect the views from the cluster of historical buildings in the conservation area. So it does not meet that test, in fact, of either preserving or enhancing. In my view, it does detract. And that is the reason to refuse.
Thank you very much, Peter. Councillor Draper, Nick.
Yes, thanks, Chair. These flats were built before I became a councillor, but while I was living in Collier's Wood, and when they first came up, I thought I was very nervous about them. I didn't think that they would be remotely pretty, and unlike Vista Prospect and Independence House, which are hideous, and which I think we've actually voted to increase the flooring on at least one of them already. This is a really rather not just pretty but rather remarkable development. At first sight it's blocky, but then when you come to realize its relationship with the river and everything like that, you realize exactly why it is the height it is, why it is made of the materials that it is, and it fits, it works. There's no other way of saying it. It fits with the mills as they stand. Now, you said it's a judgment call. And unfortunately, it is just that. As far as I'm concerned, it's a judgment call. This extra floor in the materials that it's shown, with the design that it's got, does not enhance that original award-winning. That's really important. I don't think anybody's actually said this. When Bennett's Courtyard came in, it actually won awards, or at least one national award, that is. It doesn't enhance that, and in my view, it does detract from it. And it certainly doesn't preserve what you've got already. I think it lessens what you've got already. Now, from that point of view, I can't see how I can vote for this. The devil in me was going to say, well, actually, we haven't got proper things on the affordable flat, and we could defer on that basis, just as I did with the last one. But I don't think it deserves that. I think I'm going to have to vote against it, and I'm very, very sorry.
Thank you, Nick. Just on one of your points about the nearby blocks that have had an extra story put on top, that was under the prior approvals process that the government brought in, which allows, with planning committees having much less power to stop that, which applies to those blocks nearby which aren't in the conservation area. If it's in the conservation area, it does need full planning permission, and the prior approval process doesn't work. And that's why we are considering full planning permission rather than a prior approval on this. Now, I'm not seeing anyone else. So it is the discussion we've been having. If you believe that this proposed extension either preserves or enhances the conservation area, you vote in favour of this application, unless you have another reason to vote against. But I'm not hearing much of that. If you believe that putting an extra story on this block detracts from the conservation area, and as I've got to repeat, not the building itself, but the area as a whole, then you should vote against. But as Councillor Alamberitis went first, suggesting that we should accept the officer's recommendation to grant planning permission for that, that is what I will put to the vote. And so I'm seeing anyone else want to add to that. So all those in favour of granting planning permission? I'm seeing 3. All those against? 5. That's 3 to 5 of the 8, with myself not voting, and as I said earlier, the Liberal Democrat missing. So we have rejected agenda item 9. Thank you for that so far. We are an hour and a half in. We've done 2 of the 6, but we've done the 2, I think, which is going to take the longest. So I'm going to give us a 10 minutes at most break. We will return at 9 o'clock on the dot. Thank you.